everybody. Happy Friday, Norwich City. The big games keep rolling round. It's Sunderland at Carrow Road this weekend. Norwich City, of course, in the playoffs after their big win away at Millwall last Saturday. So with that, delighted to be joined by Connor Southwell as we preview this big game. Of course, we want your comments and questions, so get them down in the comment section below, and we'll come around to those towards the end of the show. But Connor, to start the show, just want to reflect on that Millwall game. We're a week on. I saw you during the week, and you said it was probably the best performance and win you'd seen all season. So just want to get your reflections on that game last week at the Den.
Yeah, I would sort of echo those sentiments, really. I think it was the biggest win of the season, and not necessarily the best performance of the season, but certainly in terms of the character test and the amount of work they had to put into it and the adversity that was kind of thrown in their way for a group that David Wagner admitted doesn't necessarily handle adversity that well. Certainly the biggest win, in my view, for a team that is contending for the playoffs. I think we viewed that, and it might have even been on here last week that we spoke about it. It served as a benchmark against which we could compare Norwich City and the progress that they made under David Wagner and the fact they came through it, but also the manner of which they came through it. I actually think if David Wagner was sat down and was thinking, right, what's the best way to kind of test these players and for me to kind of extract what I need to extract out of them, I think he'd have probably picked circumstances like that. Probably not necessarily in the moment, because it wasn't necessarily good for the heart rate, as we had, 6-7 minutes of added time, but they got through it, and they got through it in a really good fashion, scored some excellent goals. And I said this a few times, but I think the hope that was there amongst fans has now turned into a real belief. So, yeah, any sort of superlative that you can throw to describe that victory, I think all stands. It was absolutely seismic in terms of Norwich City season, in my view, and could be a moment that we reflect back on in May if we're popping champagne corks. Not that I want to get too carried away, and say that was the moment. That was the one that we look back on and say that was the big one. That was the turning point. That was the decisive moment. So, look. It was a big win, but if they lose against Sunderland, then it undoes all of that good work. So another positive result, and I think we'll be reflecting on this block of games as a huge success for Norwich City, and that's the challenge.
Yeah, of course, Gabriel Sara got most of the headlines last Saturday, but a man who, provided 1 assist by Opta, but 2 assists, which has been debated on social media this week. Of course,
2, Adam. It's 2.
Hernandez, of course, is that man who seems to have really, sort of grasped the nettle underneath David Wagner. 1 goal, 4/5 assists, where it was only 1 goal under Dean Smith in the first half of the season. So, Connor, just how impressed have you been with him? I mean, he's only got, just under 6 months left on the contract, but surely the contract's got to be on the table, ready to sign, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think the transformation, it's not just him. And again, we've spoken about it a few times. It's in a lot of players that David Wagner has overseen. I think it's a testament to the work that him and his coaches have done since they came in. Individually, collectively, Norwich City are improving. And Onel Hernandez is a really graphic example of that. I'm going to say 5 assists. I think, if... and my argument, I think, on the podcast and when we spoke about it in the car on the way back was if a Norwich player had backheeled that into the net, it would be Onel Hernandez's assist. So I don't really see why that's different for an own goal. But there we go. If you want to take it off him, take it off him. But after, criticism for years of his end product, I think it would then be particularly harsh to take it off him. So I'm going to give him that assist. And yeah, it's been remarkable, actually. And that has been the major thing. It's been people talking about the final ball and the end product that he does have or doesn't have or didn't have, to now what we're seeing is this player that is beginning to lift his head up in key moments, is beginning to make good decisions in the final third, that's beginning to back up a feeling of causing threat and causing danger without necessarily, with maybe firing blank at the end of it. We're now beginning to see passes that are hitting targets, crosses that are hitting targets, intelligent movement, intelligent running. And you've got to say, and you look at the evidence, that's down to not just the coaching, but I also think the confidence and kind of the mental aspects that David Wagner is giving him. But the improvement's been massive. And you rightly say there, you've also got the contractual element. He is desperate to stay at Norwich City. I spoke to him after the Coventry game and he said that pretty much. So that's bound to be a factor as well. So in this element, you're kind of like, you want him to sign a new contract, but maybe just leave it dangling for a little bit longer just to keep this run of form going. He's in a real purple patch, and given obviously Kieran Dowell's injury and Aaron Ramsey's exit, Todd Cantwell's exit. I think there's a lot of talk around creativity in January. I think probably, if we're being honest, very few saw Onel Hernandez as being one of the solutions, given the role that he played in the team at that point. So the fact he's done it is a real credit to himself as well. I feel and have always felt the end product criticism of him is slightly harsh for two reasons. One being the first, that if he did have that end product, he wouldn't be playing for Norwich City in the first place. But also, and also, I think it's an easy criticism for wide players. We see that happen at all levels of the game. But also, if you kind of look at the underlying data of it, per 90, no Norwich City player has created more shot creating action. So, i.e., they've not created or been involved in a move that ends in a shot as frequent as Onel Hernandez. So that threat has always been there. Maybe you could argue that it's better finishing that is now the reason Onel Hernandez is getting a push in assist numbers. But yeah, when he plays in the way that he did on Saturday last weekend, he causes absolute terror for opposition fullbacks, and that is what he needs to create between now and the end of the season. So massively impressed with him, but I would put him in a select group of 5-6 players, all ages, all characteristics, all positions, that have shown real improvement since David Wagner took the wheel, so to speak.
Yeah, it certainly feels like another goal is coming close for Onel Hernandez. Hit the post, didn't he, a couple of weeks back. So let's hope Sunday's his game and he can be on the score sheet. But Connor, I just want to reflect on another point that we had a comment last week asking whether we thought Norwich would be in the top 6. At that point, you said you felt that they'd maybe fall short, but probably the next couple of games would be quite important. Obviously, they got the win at Millwall. So the next 3 games this week, of course, we've got a trip to Huddersfield and a trip to Stoke after this Sunderland game. So I suppose just how big a week is this for Norwich City? And maybe have you changed your mind on that opinion you shared last week?
I'm glad you remember that, Adam. I think I spoke about it as a block of 2 games, and I stand by that, because as good as last week's win was, I think if you lose to Sunderland, then again they come in from in behind you, and it just changes the dynamic of it. And to me, it would feel like almost someone popping a balloon of optimism. Maybe popping is a bit strong, but certainly letting some of the air out of the optimism that is built. So it does, and I think Tony Kerrison's commented on Facebook, it absolutely does need backing up with another, I would say, result, perhaps necessarily the win. I don't actually think a draw here would be the worst thing in the world for Norwich, although I understand that the feeling is going to be that it needs to be a win. I can completely understand that as well. So I said 4 points would probably alter my feeling, or begin to alter my feeling. Last Saturday was the first time I've watched Norwich City play this season and thought, yeah, that's a side that can finish in the top 6. So that for me feels like the benchmark. We need to see more performance levels like that, more evidence of them being able to come through tests of character like that, but also more evidence that they can beat the teams in and around them. And I think Ewan wrote in his column today, it's 5 or 6 teams left in the top half. I think it's 5 teams left in the top half. April looks absolutely massive. So I'm probably feeling more optimistic on sort of away from that statement than I was last week, but I'm not totally in the bandwagon of everything's rosy in the garden again. So I think there's still more work to do, and I think there's more character tests to come. For example, after this weekend, going to a Neil Warnock side that are faced with relegation on a Wednesday night, whilst that may feel like one that Norwich City, and they will be expected to win it by all accounts, it's still going to be a really, really tough fixture. And actually, we're kind of getting into that stage of the season now where those teams at the bottom become more dangerous than those teams who are kind of in the middle and are kind of on the beach, to use that expression. And I hate that cliched expression, but it's true. So all of the 11 games are massive. I sound like a football manager here. Of course they are. But if they can back up what they did last week with another performance at Carrow Road, then yeah, I think I'll be tempted to begin to sort of dip my toe in the water of that kind of top 6 feeling that a lot of people have at this moment in time.
Yeah, of course, Sunderland, the visitors to Carrow Road this weekend, certainly feeling for their fans at a 12 o'clock kickoff. We, of course, done that on the reverse fixture back in sort of late August time. And, that's certainly a difficult one for those fans making the long trip, especially given the conditions as well at the moment. So certainly, hats off to any Sunderland fans making the trip down to Norfolk. But Connor, they're struggling a bit. 3 straight defeats, only 1 win in 5 as well. Of course, they suffered that really horrible 5-1 defeat last week against their former manager, Alex Neil, and his Stoke side. So they're certainly coming into this feeling probably a little bit battered and bruised, and their playoff hopes that they probably aspired to, be pushing towards it in the latter stages of the season have maybe slightly dwindled. They're 6 points behind Norwich at the moment. So I suppose, one, what have you made of them so far this season? And two, what sort of reaction do you expect from them coming down to Carrow Road this Sunday?
Yeah, I appeared in a Sunderland podcast earlier and was speaking about this. Now, I think the Ross Stewart injury that he had and that they had has derailed them slightly. A lot of their build-up was aimed at being direct and playing balls into him, and he's such a presence and a really good player by all accounts. That's really hurt them. I think they've had to basically now try and play through midfield, which is a complete kind of contradiction to what they were doing and having real success with earlier on in the season. I think that's probably why the teaming issues as they transition or try to transition away from that style of play has caused a few hiccups and a few issues. And I think that maybe accounts for the issues that they've had. Actually, they had quite a bit of the ball, I think, last weekend by all accounts. So it was counter-attacking situations that maybe hurt them in the end. And I don't really foresee that being a situation that they have to endure at Carrow Road. I think Norwich will be quite happy to have quite a bit of the possession. So it's going to be a different game. And you're right. I think there will be a response of some kind, and there always is. And I think you can kind of put the response in two camps. Sometimes you see teams come and be ultra conservative and try and almost prevent limit damage or sort of limit the hurt and limit what happened last weekend, and camp players in front of their own goal and try to ensure that they leave with something and get a result and look probably defensively a little bit more sound. Or you can be in the other camp where teams come out and they come out swinging a little bit because they're a little bit hurt and they've just jumped off the canvas and as you say, they're feeling those bruises a little bit. So I'm really intrigued to see kind of what camp they reside in. I think it will probably be the defensively set up one where they invite Norwich onto them and try and pick them off on the counter, and Norwich do leave gaps. So that would feel like probably a more acute or cuter way of playing it. And Tony Mowbray himself is a very good coach by all accounts. So that's going to be interesting to see. But yeah, look, I think it's easy to measure them and say, look, they're Sunderland Football Club, and so their performance this season probably isn't that surprising. But actually, I'm more inclined to use the measuring stick of them being the team that came up through the playoffs in League One last year, for them to be where they are at this moment in time. And even though, as you say, 3 straight defeats, still in touch of the top 6, I think most Sunderland fans probably would have taken that after the chaos of recent years at that football club. But also, obviously, the upheaval of Alex Neil leaving, it was only the reverse fixture of this where it was a bit, is he going to be in the dugout? Is he not going to be in the dugout? Of course, he wasn't in the end, and he joined Stoke. So to have all of that chaos, even this season, for me to be where they are at this moment in time is pretty impressive, and should give them a foundation to build on. I think Tony Mowbray has proved, his championship record proves that he's capable of building teams up. He did that at Blackburn over a number of years, kind of quiet improvement. A club that was, again, pretty in flux all of the time and kind of felt like it was in chaos all of the time. And he managed to stabilise that. I think we'll see the case for Sunderland now. And actually, there's probably a case that a few years of stabilisation at championship level isn't the worst thing that can happen, particularly with, I think, some pretty clever people at that club in recruitment positions. So, look, and again, I'll finish by saying what I said on that podcast, which was, before this kind of 2-week block of games, Norwich City fans were dubbing it as crucial to their season. That's a testament to how well Sunderland have done. Also, you could argue to how Norwich have underperformed, but also where Norwich fans saw Sunderland in the overall playoff picture. So a win this weekend completely sort of revives their prospects, doesn't it, I think? So, yeah, it's a big weekend, and it's an interesting opponent. I think David Wagner will be really excited for it. And obviously, Norwich will be hoping that they can sort of push that gap to what would it be, 9 points, wouldn't it, over Sunderland in 11th? So that would be pretty seismic, I think, heading into the final 10 games of the season if they could do that.
Yeah, there's a couple of former Canaries in the Sunderland camp, probably one slightly more memorable than the other. Of course, Patrick Roberts, just a handful of appearances, but a certain Alex Pritchard, who, of course, Norwich City sold for big money to Huddersfield Town back in, was it 2018, I think, in the January transfer window under Daniel Farker. Of course, I think this is actually his first return to Carrow Road, if I've done my research correct. He missed the 7-0 drubbing of Huddersfield. I think he wasn't in the squad that evening. So this is his first return. So, Connor, one, have you seen much of him this season? And is he sort of a threat for Sunday? And two, I suppose, what sort of reception are you expecting for him? Obviously, he left in slightly difficult circumstances, didn't he?
Yeah, I could kind of see him getting completely ignored, if I'm honest with you, because even though he left in disappointing fashion, it was really disappointing fashion in the end. I think Stuart Webber's spoken publicly about it and just how frustrated they were with how much he forced that move to Huddersfield, including probably heading for a medical when he shouldn't have headed for a medical. But that is the way transfers in modern football work. So. Look, he had some good moments on the pitch. I think he kind of got caught in Wes Hoolahan's shadow a little bit during his time at the club, but there were some good moments. I think there was obviously a little bit of frustration around how Norwich looked after him through a pretty crucial or pretty bad injury, and he came back, played a couple of games, looked impressive by all accounts, and then really pushed to leave. And I think anyone who does that at any football club is not going to be remembered pretty fondly. But overall, I'm not sure, and look, maybe I'll get proven wrong and he'll get booed to the hills. I'm not sure, but it just feels to me like he'll probably get ignored, and you know, maybe there'll be a few jibes if Norwich City get themselves in front. But I could actually see Patrick Roberts getting a worse reception, just because again it's probably a bit more fresh in the mind a little bit how that all panned out. So in terms of him this season, for Pritchard's perspective, I think it's been the type of campaign that he needed. I think there were probably a lot of question marks and a lot of people looking at his career when he decided to join Sunderland in League One. He's been a bit in and out recently, but there's evidence that Tony Mowbray really rates him and that he can really contribute. He scored their only goal last weekend by all accounts. So, I think there's still work for him to do at Sunderland. And I think he's 30 now, isn't he? So he's getting into the kind of experienced player realm. It's going to be interesting to see how he's done. I've not watched too much of him this season, to be honest. I think kind of every Sunderland game that I've watched, he hasn't really featured in, or if he's featured in, he's played a small part in. So, looking forward to where he plays, if he plays, and kind of how he does and how he does in that sort of atmosphere, if it is one that is quite hostile towards him. But it's going to be. I mean, how do you feel that they're going to be viewed? You might be in a better position to comment than me, but I kind of feel like with Pritchard, you could make a pro and cons argument, and I'm not sure the exit outweighs the positives so much that he's going to get that bad a reaction. I don't know your view. Maybe people watching can tell us as well.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I can imagine it being quite a mixed reaction. I think certainly, there was lots of positive moments of some really big goals in different points in his sort of spell at the club. But also, I think the way, the departure is always going to be remembered. And, obviously, of course, it brought in some good money for the club. They have made a profit on him, which is always, key to the model that Norwich are operating, particularly given at that point of time. So just dropping now into the comments, Connor. I've got a few flying in. I've got an American watcher there, JB, and he's actually got a question. Does Ida play on the outside again with Pukki up top? That was kind of one of my next questions, Connor, about what sort of lineup do you expect to see from David Wagner on Sunday. Of course, he's often made changes that we maybe don't expect. I mean, Jakob Sorensen, of course, has come in recent games and he's played different positions as well. Of course, Sarah, I think there's a few people noticed that he wasn't in the training video. Well, we're speaking to David Wagner in about an hour and a half's time, so we'll get an update on that. Josh Sargent, of course, was also pictured back in training, so lots of different options, Connor. So I suppose one, what sort of lineup are you expecting? And that probably links into JB's question there.
Yeah, well, I'd say we're kind of speaking before the press conference, so before any fitness issues. I also believe that Gabriel Sara wasn't at the sponsors' dinner that was held in the week as well. So we'll obviously see if that is anything of note. He might have just been feeling slightly under the weather. I've just, as anyone who's listened to the latest podcast will know, I've just had a cold myself, so there's plenty flying around. I could see him going unchanged. I think last weekend was probably the best iteration that we've seen of this David Wagner formation and style. And I really liked actually what Adam Ida did on the what was he, left wing, because he gave them an option to progress the ball. They used his physicality quite well, and they kind of bounced off him. He was almost in kind of like a wide target man role, which was really interesting. And Gabriel Sara in that more advanced role, and I actually felt defensively in that kind of 4-1-4-1 shape, they looked pretty solid. So there was quite a lot to like from what they did last weekend. Whether he's tempted enough, and it does look like Sargent's going to be back this weekend, to throw him straight in from the off. I think he'll probably be a little bit more pragmatic and probably introduce him from the bench first. That tends to be the way that he's done it with players who are returning from injury. We saw that route taken with Temi Pukki. We'll see. So all of that sort of thrown in with the fact that they've had kind of 8 days to work. I could see him going for an unchanged side this weekend, because I think the balance that they managed to strike last weekend was really, really impressive and accomplished, and they passed the character test ultimately. And I think whilst you've got players in form and performing positively, you almost don't want to touch that. But I think there are arguments to make changes in some areas. There is an argument, for example, as you made, to take Sørensen out of it, drop Sauer back, and push Sargent up again. So yeah, we'll see what it looks like. But as I sit here right now, as I said before the press conference and before, he's about to list 7 injuries. I don't know if he's about to do that, by the way. I'm not only suggesting that out there. But as I sit here right now, it would feel like an unchanged side would probably be most logical at this moment in time.
Yeah, I spoke to a Sunderland fan on Terrace Talk this week, and he was kind of saying that the midfield area is probably Sunderland's weakness. They've really struggled. I think they lost Evans in the centre, who's been as their captain and quite a crucial cog in their midfield. So that certainly feels like an area that if Norwich City can dominate that area, they'll probably have some success. Just dropping into the comments, Connor Dack on YouTube saying, "I'm so happy for Onel. Great to know we have a player performing really well who loves the club." Yeah, certainly agree with that one. Joseph Bridgewood on YouTube as well, asking what the mood's going to be like at Carrow Road on Sunday. Connor, it's going to be electric, isn't it? Surely everyone's going to be up for this one. I mean, David Wagner at the sort of post-match press conference after Millwall was speaking about kind of the atmosphere needs to be really electric and everyone needs to be behind the boys on Sunday. So it's going to be like that, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And I think you're right. I think it's got to be. I personally found Carrow Road quite an interesting place to watch football this year. I don't think the atmosphere's been that great. And look, there's a lot of reasons for that. And I'm not throwing blame at anyone because it's been a difficult season to show support. But I think this is a game that I'm really relishing, and I'm sure a lot of other people will be really relishing as well after last week, because as big as the 3,000 following was last week, it was only 3,000. I think the vast majority will want to see a level of performance that is similar to that. And that will, again, feed into the kind of hope into belief point that I made earlier. So, yeah, it's a massive game, and I expect to see Carrow Road respond to what they've seen in recent weeks and what David Varga's been able to cultivate in terms of not just on the pitch, but also the ability to kind of connect with supporters and bring people together. It's one of the reasons that he was appointed. He did it so brilliantly at Huddersfield as well, that ability to drag people with him on this journey and that sort of sense of inclusion that he's been able to create. So, yeah, I expect Carrow Road to be really bouncing. I don't know if the drum will be there, but I always tend to find, or have seen in recent weeks, that has kind of helped with the atmosphere as well. And then, of course, it will be how the game pans out from there. But certainly initially, yeah, I think this is a big game, and I would expect Norwich City fans to respond to that in kind, really. And I think all of it feeds to this sense of occasion that's building up on towards that game on Sunday, because a win, for me, will just, again, bring all of this that we're talking about, all this positive feeling, all that momentum on another week. And again, it's a busy week next week with a game on Wednesday and then an away game at Stoke next Saturday. So if they can win this, then I think people will look forward to those 2 away games with a real sense of optimism, as is the case at this moment in time. So yeah, bring the noise is David Wagner's message. And yeah, I hope Norwich City fans respond, as I'm sure they will.
Yeah, before we come around to the score prediction question, we've got another question on YouTube asking, what do you think the team needs to do to develop? I mean, we've seen lots of development under David Wagner. I mean, anyone who doesn't follow NCFC analysis on Twitter, then definitely head over there. He kind of speaks about, the improvements we've seen since Wagner's arrival, the build-up structure. I mean, individual players we've already spoke about at the start of the show. Gabriel Sara, Onel Hernandez certainly look very different players to what they did under Dean Smith. So, Connor, maybe what's missing so far from David Wagner's development in terms of this squad? Is there anything or certain areas where you feel like he maybe needs to work on still?
Yeah, I still think there's more that needs to come from an attacking perspective. I've kind of been doing some number crunching this week, and I think there is an argument to say that Norwich are running a bit hot at the moment in terms of goals, and you only need to look at Marcelino Nunez's volley and Gabriel Sara's goal last week to realise that the goals that they're scoring at the moment are pretty low percentage chances, and I think if you kind of expect that to be pretty sustainable, then football has kind of shown that it's not, and there's 2 ways that can go. Either teams kind of drag the stats up with them, or they end up falling to the stats. I know that's pretty dry, but I still think there's some kind of issues to solve around consistent creativity and consistent chance creation, although it has been much better. Defensively as well, I'm still a little bit worried about, although again Saturday I felt they did this a lot better than they have done in other games, about how they control counter-attacks from opponents and their work in transition. So those are probably the areas that I'm looking at. Defensive set pieces, another, which is probably pertinent given that we've seen Alan Russell leave the club today. So those are the three big elements. But I think the nature of what they're doing and the nature of the process that they're kind of following at the moment to mould into David Wagner's team means that there are going to be days along the road where this all looks a bit disjointed and a bit muddled, and there's going to be some days where they look brilliant and rampant and like they've got it and it's clicked, and that's not always going to be the case. So I think you have to kind of be quite level-headed behind that. Obviously the points return and the performances of late have been very, very impressive. If they can do that again and they can by hook or by crook get a victory out of this game, I think what we said will be true. I think a lot of people will be talking about the top six and probably be eyeing up playoff dates. So they need to try and keep a lid on that optimism. But yeah, there's still lots, and I still see lots of improvement to come. But I think the most impressive thing is how quickly they have improved individually and collectively. And that's probably sort of feeds into, if you want to look at why there's so much positivity around Norwich City at the moment, that's a key part of it in my view, because of how much improvement they've done in a short period of time. But they do still have quite a bit to go, as I've kind of referenced there.
Yeah, before we sign off, going to come around to that point in the show, score prediction time. I'll just drop into the comments on Facebook. Craig Brooks saying this could be a weird game, could win close, could lose, could win by a huge amount. But Graham on YouTube feeling very optimistic at a 4-0 Norwich win. So what do you subscribe to there, Connor? Do you see a win, or do you think this might be a more difficult test?
No, I think this will be a really tight, close encounter. I think in a bizarre way, and it's only football that makes you feel like this, when a team has a heavy defeat, you're almost a little bit more wary of them because you expect to see a response and a reaction. And I think that is a bit of a fluke result by all accounts. I think Norwich will win. I think it'll be a fiercely contested game. I can see a 2-1, 2-0 victory to Norwich, and that's kind of the way I'm leaning, if I'm honest. What about you, Adam?
Yeah, I'm with Canary 36, 2-0 Norwich. That was the prediction I've been telling people this week. Joseph feeling even more optimistic, 3-0 Norwich there. So everyone's feeling good, which is quite nice to be recording these preview shows. Everyone's predicting 4-0, 3-0 and 2-0 Norwich City wins, because there's been points this season where that's definitely not been the case. But with that, we'll round off the show. We're soon going to be speaking to David Wagner at 2:30 kickoff for his press conference. So all the latest team news and everything you'll need to know will be coming across our channels. Of course, his press conference video will also be up later on, probably about 5-6 o'clock time. So come over to our YouTube channel to hear what he has to say. Of course, lots of other great video content as well across our YouTube channel at the moment. We've done an interview with Flo Allen during the week, the Norwich City women's team, of course, coming down to Carrow Road on the 16th of April. So if you're free that Sunday afternoon, why not go to the ticket office before the game on Sunday, pick up a ticket and come and support the ladies team as they sort of make their first appearance at Carrow Road. Terrace Talk, of course, is up as well. I spoke to a Sunderland fan, Sam Blakey, from the Roker Report Sunderland channel. He's kind of speaking about Sunderland's sort of season so far and the difficulties they've had, and Tony Mowbray since his arrival. So that's a great place to head. Connie got a nice little tip there from Canary. Brilliant interview with Flo. Really appreciate that one. And of course, lots of great content on the Pink and Plus app as well. $1.99 a month, a free trial, of course, as well. Chris Sutton, Ewan Roberts, columnists. That's always a great read. So lots of other great content, match content, of course, match coverage with Connor on Sunday. So if you not a Pink and Plus subscriber, then why not go and take out a free trial? It's well worth a look. And of course, with that, we'll be at Carrow Road on Sunday lunchtime, 11 a.m, of course, for team news. So come across our channels and we'll be providing you with the starting 11 that David Wagner is going to choose for this one. So with that, thanks for joining us. Enjoy your weekend. It's quite nice having a Saturday off. What are you going to do on your Saturday, Connor?
Nothing really exciting. I might go and watch some local football, possibly. That might be the extent of my Saturday. I'll probably spend it watching football, quite ironically. But you're right, it will be nice. It will be nice. Yeah, of course, if you're not heading down to Carrow Road, the game's also on TV. So I'm sure everyone will be supporting the boys from afar or at Carrow Road on Sunday. As I said, enjoy your weekend. We'll be at Carrow Road, so we'll see you on Sunday at 12 p.m.